Hey, everybody. Glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation, talking about current events, all kinds of stuff. So glad that you're here. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad that you're here with us tonight. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. Update on world events. I'm going to tell you what I think about the peace talks and why I'm optimistic about peace talks with Russia, but give you some necessary background about, the whole situation. But glad you're all here. The way we do these late night conversations is I generally give my opening remarks. While I give my opening remarks, you all are sending questions. You can send them via Rumble Rant or Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App. We can't do super chats on YouTube right now because of, we've been demonetized, but we can get them on Cash App. So Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App, or you can send me a Rumble Rant on the Rumble. I look forward to taking your questions. After I finish making my opening remarks, we'll then do a roll call, where I will call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who is on the other side of the camera. And then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the show. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, send a question. Questions are always appreciated. You can Rumble Rant me a question, or you can Cash App me a question. Those are the two ways through which I am taking questions, and your questions really make the second half of the show what it is. The second half of the show is often pretty exciting and pretty fun because you all ask questions. So couple announcements. The big announcement is this will be the biggest event of the year. This is going to be an anti-imperialist gathering in Chicago. Working families first, defeat the deep state, embrace a new world of peace and innovation. It's going to be on July 12th, 2025. And it should be well attended. We've got a big hall and we need you there. If there's one event that you come to this year, make it this one. This will be the keynote flagship anti-imperialist gathering of the year. You can register right now. Link is in the description. It's going to be absolutely tremendous. Scott Ritter, Garland Nixon, all kinds of big name anti-imperialists, all kinds of music and speeches and dancing, and it's going to be amazing. This is going to be the imperialist opposition, anti-imperialist gathering of the year. You don't want to miss it because anti-imperialism is the future. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Also, note that I'm headed to Los Angeles next month, May 24th. I will be doing a workshop in the LA area. I don't get out to California very often. So if you're in the California, Los Angeles area, come to the workshop. You can register down below for the workshop. Not a public event. It's a private event, but you have to, if you can register, we'll follow up with you and we'll figure out to get you to the event. So there we go. So as I said before, the format of the show is me giving my opening remarks, followed by the roll call, then followed by me answering your questions. So send your questions. If you got them, send questions via Rumble Rant on the Rumble or to Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App. So I guess I want to first start out by giving my deep condolences to the people in Bandar Abbas in Iran. That's the port city where they recently had these horrendous fires, explosions. I've actually been to Bandar Abbas. It is a port city in southern Iran. And that's where the ship I went on to Yemen in 2015, the rescue ship, the rescue humanitarian mission that I participated in, attempting to deliver humanitarian aid to Yemen. That's where that ship departed from. It departed from Bandar Abbas. And I spent quite a bit of time in Bandar Abbas waiting for the ship to be prepared. It was quite an exciting thing. We were sent off, a lot of Iranian media there. It was a big deal when that humanitarian rescue ship departed. What surprised me about Bandar Abbas when I was there was how much Chinese business there was, because the USA has economically barricaded the Islamic Republic of Iran. So Iran trades with China. And there were so many Chinese ships, so many Chinese businesses set up in Bandar Abbas, and there's a whole new economy outside of Western imperialist domination. And I saw that when I was in Iran, seeing, this entire port full of Chinese signs and Chinese ships and Chinese businesses, Chinese cars, Chinese telecommunications companies. And I was like, wow, there's this thriving port city in southern Iran. And China's all over it. And it was quite exciting for me to see. And now I see they're having a fire in Bandar Abbas. My heart goes out to the people. And, we're paying close attention to everything going on right now with the negotiations. The USA is indirectly negotiating with Iran in Oman. There is, talk of Iran renegotiating something around its nuclear program. And I'm glad the USA and Iran are talking. It's good that they're talking. I would prefer they not directly go to war. I can't say I appreciate the Trump administration's bluster and threats against Iran. I don't appreciate the Trump administration bombing Yemen. I don't appreciate the Trump administration backing Israel the way they do. But at least they're talking, right? I'd rather they be talking to Iran than attacking them. And I also remember that Biden said that he was going to resume talks with Iran and perhaps try to restore the Iran nuclear deal. And he never did it. In his 4 years as president, Biden never fulfilled that promise to talk to Iran. And now Trump, who said he would not talk to Iran, who took office on an anti-Iran platform, is talking to Iran. And talking is good. Talking is better than shooting. Talking is better than fighting. The Islamic Revolution of Iran and the people of the Middle East that are inspired by anti-imperialism and the struggle to raise their countries up has always been a topic of interest. That's why I wrote the book about the Houthis that's being widely distributed throughout the country. We have a special edition of it with the poster for our conference on the back. We're distributing thousands of copies of this book throughout the Chicago area in the lead up to our conference. And, I've done a lot of interviews about this book. There's a reason for that. And, so I'm thinking about Iran. But actually, one thing that's on my mind right now, as I look at the tragic situation with the fires there in Bandar Abbas in Iran, I'm also thinking about Russia, because we have just seen just recently, just in the last couple hours, some very positive signs. And I'm getting whispers through people I know. It looks like the Ukraine war is getting ready to end. I'm serious. Now, it ain't over till it's over, okay? And I'm never going to jump the gun and all of that. But the whispers that I'm getting and the signs that I'm seeing, the people that I'm talking to, and what I'm seeing publicly makes me think that the Ukraine war will end soon. And I really, really, really hope that that is the truth. I really hope that that is the truth, because this war never should have happened. This war was intentionally provoked by the neocons, by the U.S. Wall Street imperialists, by London. It's not what the American people want, and it is not what the people of the world want, and it's not what Russia wants. Certainly not what the Ukrainians want. But it seems to be that there is a fanatical faction that is just determined to keep Russia off the world stage, to do everything they can to weaken Russia, to isolate Russia, to threaten Russia, and Russia has to push back. And I hope that this can end. I really do hope that the war can end. And we heard Trump say that Ukraine is going to accept that Crimea is not theirs. That's big. That's a really big deal. You know, we hear Zelensky kind of tap dancing the way he's talking to his people, which seems to indicate like he's trying to prepare them for something. And then Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, he appeared on American TV recently and Marco Rubio also has been doing interviews about the talks and how they're going. So wanted to just show a clip of the Russian foreign minister. This was an interview he did, you know, on an American TV show recently, Face of the Nation. This is just a clip from it.
So back in January, Russia signed a deal with Iran to become a strategic partner. Would Russia be willing to sever that relationship at the request of the U.S. if it meant better relations with America?
There was never any request like this, and we welcome the process which was initiated between the United States and Iran. We are ready to be helpful if parties believe this can be the case, and they know this.
You were the negotiator back in 2015 on behalf of Russia for that landmark international agreement, the JCPOA. And part of how Russia was helpful was destroying Iran's enriched nuclear material. Is that an offer you would do again?
We were not involved in destroying Iran's nuclear material.
Disposing.
The part of the deal was to move some amount of this material to Russia for keeping.
Okay, so not destroying, but keeping. Would you keep Iran's enriched nuclear material that they've made in the past few years? Is that an offer to the U.S.?
We are not putting our nose in the negotiations between two countries, one of which is not Russia. And I said very clearly, I believe, but you wanted a brief answer, I will have to be longer, since it is not probably getting through. We welcome the dialogue between the US and Iran. We would be certainly ready to help if both parties believe this is going to be useful, and they know that we are ready.
Yeah. Now, that response, you know, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, I've actually had the opportunity of asking him questions on a number of occasions, being in the same room as him on a number of occasions. He's very sharp, and he knows the tricks that the media play, especially the Western media that's trying to, you know, push an agenda. And, you know, that interview very much points to an aspect of the negotiations that are taking place right now that I think is important to discuss, because, you know, as I just continue to hammer home on these streams, and as you will read about, if you read anything that the Center for Political Innovation publishes, what is innovationism? We have our booklet, Do You Believe in Growth? You know, you go to our website, you can read all about it. Our understanding is that the Western imperialist financial system is dying. The economic system where profits come before people, where production is organized to maximize profits for private owners, it is incompatible with technological advancement that we're undergoing right now. And all the built-in problems of poverty created by abundance, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, the value crisis, the glut, overproduction, all of these problems are back with a vengeance because the system of profits in command is not a rational economic system. And because of that, it can't handle great technological leaps. And in fact, great economic crises come after technological leaps, whereas there is a new economy in the world today, in Russia, in China, in Iran, in Venezuela, in Cuba, in different places, that doesn't have this problem. And that's why China has continued to build and advance. That's why Vietnam has experienced an economic miracle. That's why African countries are rising and getting stronger. That's why Russia has been able to have so much economic success since the rise of the Russian president, and, you know, how he restructured their economy to be centered around Gazprom and Rosneft, and that you need a rationally organized economy in our time because of technology. And that technology has made the profit system unsustainable. and that what we need is a government that will control the major centers of economic power and invest in people and their creative abilities rather than Wall Street ripoffs and the profits of speculators and bankers. We need a government that will invest in human beings to create real value, real physical economy, expand the productive forces, make the population smarter, and invest in education, promote a culture of optimism and hard work and creativity and etc. And if you do that, you can have a society that can continue growing and isn't held back by the irrationality of the market. We summarize that with the slogan, we need a government of action that will fight for working families. Now, that question that was just asked to the Russian foreign minister, where he's talking about negotiations with the United States, between the United States and Russia, about how to end the Ukraine war. They're asking him about Iran. Why? Because it seems that there is an understanding on the part of some within the American government, in the Trump administration in particular, that these new independent countries are not going away. Iran is not going away. Russia is not going away. China is not going away. Venezuela is not going away. Cuba is not going away. North Korea is not going away. And so the United States has to develop a relationship with them. And that if the United States can try to play favorites, perhaps, and weaken the ties between these new anti-imperialist countries, that might be to the geopolitical benefit of U.S. imperialism. That seems to be the feeling, that some people in the Trump administration are convinced that if we can sign a deal with Russia, then Russia won't be as close to China, and that'll enable the USA to go after China. Some in the Trump administration are convinced, okay, if we sign a deal with Russia, Russia can help us put pressure on Iran, and we can weaken Iran. That seems to be how they're thinking. And then we heard that straight from the voice of an American newscaster. It really does annoy me how American media isn't asking questions on behalf of what the American people want. They're asking questions on behalf of the foreign policy establishment. When Joe Biden met with Putin, the questions weren't, how were you able to find common ground? It was, did you stand up to him? Did you ask? It was like were you hard enough on Putin? Were you hostile enough? You weren't friendly, were you? The media are just war hawks. We see that, right? So right there, they're saying to Russia, okay, well, if we make a deal with you, you're going to stab Iran in the back, right? And you're going to no. And, and he said, look, we're happy that Iran and America are negotiating. I'm happy about that too. And yeah, if both parties want us to help out, help us store some of their nuclear materials or something, we'll do it. But what are you trying to do? And that news reporter there is trying to, trying to get the Russian foreign minister to say something that will make Iran feel that Russia perhaps doesn't have their back, or will confuse the relationship, or will make Russia look bad to people, in the Trump administration that are super pro-Israel and super anti-Iran. She's playing games there. And Russia is saying, look, we're happy that Iran is talking to the United States. We're not part of those negotiations. But if they want us to help out like they did the last time we have a deal, we'll do that. No big deal. And the fact that Russia has a relationship with Iran shouldn't be a shocker to anybody. Iran has been subjected to huge, horrendous U.S. sanctions. And so has Russia. And they're very close to each other. Russia has more Muslims in it than any other non-Muslim country, right? You go through Russia, through the southern republics, all throughout Russia, you have lots of Muslims. Iran is a Muslim country. Russia is an anti-imperialist country. They're very proud of their legacy of resistance to imperialism. And Iran was born in an anti-colonial revolution, the 1979 Islamic Revolution. So it wouldn't be a shocker. It's not a shocker that they have a relationship, and a military relationship at that. The United States is not going to sell weapons to Iran. Well, Russia, they sell weapons, and they'll sell weapons to Iran, and Iran needs lots of weapons to protect themselves from the United States. And Russia's also got all kinds of weapons to protect themselves from the United States. It's not a shocker that Russia and Iran would have a relationship. Now, at one point, Russia and Israel were quite close. That's not the case any longer. There are still relations between Russia and Israel. That's true. But there is no harsher critic of Israel since October 7th than Russia. Russia has really been very loudly opposed to Israel. In the past, there's been times where Russia has made statements almost supporting Israeli military activities. That is not the case right now. Russia is loudly championing the rights of the Palestinians. Russia has loudly condemned U.S. military activities against the Houthis in Yemen. Russia, when it comes to the Middle East, they are pretty solidly taking anti-imperialist positions. They sent their military to Syria to fight against ISIS and the terrorist groups there that were being backed by the United States against the Syrian government. Russia, at this point, they have a close relationship with Iran. And at this point, there is now an officially announced relationship, military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. There have been rumors for months and months about North Korean soldiers fighting in Ukraine that couldn't be confirmed. Now it is announced officially that there are North Korea will cooperate with Russia in their war in Ukraine as long as it continues. And there's been rumors, and President Putin visited North Korea, and there's been a special agreement between North Korea and Russia. But now officially, it is said that Russia and North Korea are officially going to be cooperating in Ukraine, and that shouldn't come as a big shocker either. However, what also shouldn't come as a big shocker is that while the United States is on the brink, it looks like we're on the brink of ending this war and signing a peace treaty. They've announced that the talks with North Korea, the Trump administration today put out a press release saying that they are planning to restart the talks with North Korea as well. And that is a really big step forward. This is all very, very, very important because North Korea is not going to go away. Russia is not going to go away. Iran is not going to go away. China is not going to go away. And it's better to negotiate with these countries, to trade and do business with these countries, and to be part of a multipolar world in which these countries can participate than it is to engage in threats and provocations and attacks, right? And that is just basic common sense. It is very easy to just sit back and condemn, to just sit back and say, well, the United States may be negotiating with Russia, but that's just a scheme, and they want to turn up the heat against China and Iran. Yeah, there's plenty of people in the Trump administration who probably want that. But wouldn't it be better if people stopped dying on the battlefield in Ukraine for any reason? Right? There are probably people in the Trump administration that want to end the Ukraine war so they can escalate against China. I don't agree with them, obviously. But wouldn't it be good to have a peace treaty? You can get mad, right? And I am a very angry person, and I really very much oppose U.S. attacks on all of these countries. As someone who's traveled to these countries, people who's met victims, people who couldn't get the medical care they needed because of sanctions. I've seen what U.S. imperialist policies do, and I'm very opposed to all of them, and I'm very angry about it. But part of being angry about it is wanting to change it. And wanting to change it means being as loud as you possibly can be when there's a potential breakthrough for an improvement. And right now, there is a big potential for a breakthrough and an improvement on Ukraine. It looks like within days, we could be seeing an end to the Ukraine war and a lifting of all sanctions on Russia. That is what is being pushed forward right now. A lifting of all sanctions on Russia, an end to the Ukraine war, Ukraine recognizing that Crimea is part of Russia. And there's still a lot of questions there, like what about the new republics that just voted to join with Russia? What about Donetsk People's Republic? What about Lugansk People's Republic? What about Odessa, right? There's questions that are not, being thrown out there, but it appears what's out there now is that Ukraine is ready to recognize that Crimea is Russia, and that the USA and Russia are about to make a peace deal to end this war, and that when that peace deal goes into effect, all the sanctions on Russia get pulled, lifted at that point. and that would be a very, very, very good development, a very, very good development if it were to happen. And if it happens, I can tell you that there is one organization in America that has done more than any other to make that happen, and that's the Center for Political Innovation. We, from the beginning, have been staging pro-Russia events. We were in the streets of New York City marching, saying Russia is not our enemy. We had a rally in Texas. We were at Trump's inauguration. We went to the World Youth Festival. We had press conferences at the United Nations. I spoke directly with the Russian president. We have worked relentlessly. We have been the main vehicle advocating peace with Russia and saying that that is the majority perspective on the part of the American people. And don't you forget it. There's a lot of people on the internet who just talk on the internet and get a lot of views and shares. We have been out there reaching people who would never go looking for this message. We've been out there in a way that the world can't miss us, not just people that agree with us and hear about us on the internet, not just people, who agree with us. We've been out there spreading this message among the American people with rallies, with demonstrations, with UN press conferences. We've gone to Russia and brought the message that the majority of the American people don't support the war. We said that directly to the Russian president. We have done more than anybody else to be a voice for peace with Russia. And before we continue that, before we continue this, I have to just quickly show you that, because people like to gloss over CPI. There is a big effort to try and pretend we don't exist and, whatever. We have done more than anybody else. We were just in Minneapolis. So I'm going to show you just some videos showing what we have done, when it comes to, peace with Russia. I'm just going to highlight that because I really want you all to be aware. I mean, we have worked tirelessly around this issue. And we are the main voice of anti-imperialism in America. Other people might get really, really angry and get on the internet and cuss other people out. Other people might, talk a lot of communist theory and ideology, but we're out there actively building the peace movement. We have done so much at the United Nations. We have done so much internationally at international gatherings. We have done so much in the streets of America. So, I guess I'll show you quickly. I will show you what we did in Minneapolis. I'll show you, some of our event in Minneapolis that we did. And then I'll show you. First, I'll show you just an overview of what we've done since the beginning of the war. Then I'll show you our recent event in Minneapolis, and we'll continue to talk about things because there's a lot that I want to talk about here. I want to give you proper perspective on where we're at. So this is a quick review of everything we've done advocating peace with Russia since the beginning of the war.
Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy.
Used the energy revenue to rebuild the industries of Russia, and he made Russia once again a strong economy. And that is why U.S. media demonizes Russia. That is why the U.S. government toppled the government of Ukraine in 2014 with the Euro-Maidan coup and installed a fanatically anti-Russian regime in Kiev. I saw a CNN reporter claim that Ukraine was a peaceful country until now. Well, this is the monument in Donbass to all the children who have died of the shelling and the bombing being carried out by the U.S.-backed regime in Kiev. 14,000 plus people dead, children who have died. It hasn't been a peaceful country. The people of Donbass have been subject to 8 years of bombing, 8 years of shelling, 8 years of a food blockade, and Russia is now moving in to protect them and bring an end to this. The Wall Street money sharks hate Russia, they hate China, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, and many other countries because they have governments that stand up to the international bankers and their monopolistic corporations.
And it's not a good situation. People are dying and it needs to end. And we need there to be a negotiation. We want there to be peace in Ukraine, and that means that our leaders sit down and negotiate. It doesn't mean that Boris Johnson gets on the phone and wrecks a peace deal just because he wants people to keep dying. Global food crisis spawned by a war. That's right. Russia is not our enemy. 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 Russia was with us in the fight against the Nazis in World War II. At the moments when America shows its true colors and is standing up for justice and truth, you'll notice that we're standing with Russia.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
It's time to stand for peace here at the United Nations. We are marching up to the religious rally. Russia and China are not our enemy.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
Peace with Russia. Peace with China.
Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia. Peace with China. Peace with Russia.
Youth festivals are very, very important to my organization in particular, the Center for Political Innovation. Every meeting that we have, we begin with the pledge. We've changed the word youth for people because we have people of all ages, but we begin, we raise our right hands, we pledge that we shall remember this unity forged at the end of the Second World War, not only today, not only this year, this week, but always, and the pledge goes on. But that is such a beautiful pledge that came out of the World Democratic Youth Federation. And I must say that the youth festivals represent the best, not just of this country, but of America. A time when we stood in solidarity with Russia to defeat fascism. And they're trying to erase that from American history.
I'm Caleb Maupin, the chair of the U.S. delegation, and he also represents the Center for Political Innovation.
Welcome, everybody. My name's Caleb Maupin. I'm the founder of the Center for Political Innovation. And in October, I was deeply honored when the youth office of the Russian Foreign Ministry reached out to me about forming a national preparatory committee for the upcoming World Youth Festival, set for March in Russia. As someone who attended the World Festival of Youth and Students in 2013 in Quito, Ecuador, someone who attended the festival that was held in Sochi in 2017, as an advocate of socialism, peace, and international cooperation, as an American patriot, as a Christian, and someone who strives to live according to the teachings of Jesus Christ, I considered this to be a great opportunity. However, it is the circumstances of our upcoming trip that bring us here today. As we meet here today, Jesse Neville, Penny Hess, and Omali Yeshitela have been indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice. They are facing a possible 15 years in prison. Their trial date was just set for September. The Biden administration has charged them for doing what we are about to do, for going to an international conference in Russia. I'm the leader of the United States delegation. I'm representing the Center for Political Innovation. And I would like to just thank you from the bottom of my heart for that dynamic interview you gave to Tucker Carlson, in which you showed many, many young Americans a different kind of leadership, because our politicians and our leaders in the United States, they speak in sound bites, they speak in terms of scandal and gossip, but you presented a long-term vision, a scientific view of statecraft, and by getting through to young Americans, you made a difference. Many people who would never have listened to anything you had to say or heard another perspective heard you because of that interview. Now, getting to my question, things between our two countries are not good at this point. You know, before we left, we had to have a press conference at the United Nations. We are concerned about being prosecuted. There are 3 Americans that have already been charged and are facing prosecution, possibly 15 years in prison, simply because they attended a conference like this in Russia, the Yahoo movement they're called. And we are concerned because I know that I speak for the majority of the American people when I say that we do not want our tax money dumped into this conflict in Ukraine any longer. We do not want our country to continue to deteriorate internally while our leaders waste money on prolonging this war. I'm frightened by what the Biden administration is doing, not just in Ukraine, but also on Taiwan and on the Korean Peninsula. And I really do see gatherings like this as a potential road to peace. And what I have seen at this festival has blown my mind. The amount of young volunteers that you have here, people who have stepped up, who love their country and want to just come forward and put together dynamic events like this. What kind of role can events like this and young diplomacy activities like this play in helping set the stage for maybe changing the dangerous direction our leaders in the United States are taking things against the majority of the wishes of the majority of the people of our country? Thank you.
The United States of America is a huge and unique country. In its own way, over 300 years, in just 300 years, which is a small period of time compared to our history, but thanks to the talents of the Americans, it became a superpower, which is an obvious fact. We know outstanding American politicians, we know outstanding American business people, cultural activists, which is an obvious fact. We used to be allies during 2 world wars as we fought Nazism and fascism. What happened recently? After the war, after the alliance, the United States and the Soviet Union started dividing the world, and they did so successfully. And based on this balance of powers, they created international relations and created the modern system of international law. Then the Soviet Union ceased to exist for a number of reasons. I will not go into detail, but they were mainly internal reasons. There is one superpower remaining, represented by your country. The way your elites use this monopoly to global domination is dubious. In my opinion, the United States failed to bear this burden of responsibility that they happen to bear. They created monopoly, strengthened it. I don't mean the American people, I mean the ruling elites. While strengthening their monopoly, they soon faced a situation where the overwhelming majority of countries disliked it. And so, step by step, it became obvious to everyone that there is resistance to the forming global order.
All right, so we're here at Trump Tower.
They told you these people are horrible. They told you these people are terrible, that they will never do anything good for us. There's a reason for that. It's called money. It's called power. They want to weaken you mentally. They want to capture your spirit, stomp you out, and tell you, why bother? Why get out of bed in the morning? Why do anything worthwhile? No.
Great again. This was a great moment when Trump talked to Kim Jong-un and started the process of peace on the Korean Peninsula. And we want to see peace not just with North Korea, but with Russia, with China, with many countries around the world. It is outrageous that billions of dollars is being spent on prolonging the war in Ukraine when our people can't get relief in North Carolina. People are left behind in Georgia and North Carolina. They can't get any relief they need. This is outrageous. Our government is more concerned with waging wars around the world than for caring for our own people. And we need a president who will put America first, a president who will bring peace around the world. Only peace can make America.
Big crowd of people, huge crowd of people here to support Donald Trump, pouring in to watch the inauguration ceremony in the Capital One Arena. Yeah, we set up here and over there. How you feeling? How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good. It was fun to pass out pamphlets at the hotel there. Everybody was asking for more.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We need to heal America as well. We need to pray for America. We need to make our country great again. We need to take over. The people need to take over to make our country better again. And I hope Trump can help us with that.
Donald Trump for one of the greatest moments of his first presidency, when he went to a country that America has technically been at war with since the 1950s and gave peace a chance. We want to make peace around the world.
Yeah, folks, that's us. That's CPI. And I've got another video real quick, just highlighting what we did in Minneapolis.
Trump is set to speak to the Russian president tomorrow. And I'm proud to say that we, the Center for Political Innovation, have had a lot to do with that. Ever since the Ukraine war began, we've been in the streets loudly saying Russia is not our enemy, calling for negotiations, etc. And recently, when we were in Minneapolis for a small workshop we did, we figured we couldn't leave town without doing that. And so myself and Penny and Gabby, we went to downtown Minneapolis with a big banner.
We're here in front of the Spoon Bridge in Minneapolis to support peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. We have confronted our government multiple times.
And I must say we got a very, very positive response. Minneapolis is supposed to be a Democrat Party city. Minneapolis is pretty woke, so to speak, but there seemed to be overwhelming support for our message of peace with Russia. People were honking their horns, giving thumbs up, a wide variety of folks. People that looked like they were Trump supporters, people looked like they were young urban professionals. It was really, really great to see how sympathetic people were to our message of peace with Russia. It was also great to hear our members. One of the great things about having these little speak out rallies is that our members get a chance to speak. And Gabby got on the bullhorn, gave her perspective.
We don't need this war. We might not agree everything what Trump is doing, but we need peace.
Penny got on the bullhorn, gave her perspective as a local from Minneapolis, a mom, a working person who doesn't want her son to get killed in a war.
Jobs for Americans, healthcare, schools, not billions of dollars. Pat the pockets of the warmongers.
I was there, I spoke as well.
Why are they cutting services for Americans? Why did people get left stranded after the hurricane in North Carolina, but they've got billions of dollars for Ukraine?
We need to raise this message everywhere we can, and we have as CPI. We're building a community of solidarity and resistance. That's what the Center for Political Innovation is. We're not a fandom. We're headed out to LA soon. We're having our big convention in July. We're a real community of people working together to build a movement. We demand a government of action that fights for working families.
Yeah. And then we were in Chicago just recently. I'll quickly put a video of that on. That was pretty great. Yeah, just quickly.
Government of action to fight for working families. We're here because we want wars to end. We want peace in Ukraine.
This is who we elected President Trump to be. What he did when he met with Kim, right? And last time around, he let John Bolton sabotage it. He let Mike Pompeo sabotage it. To his credit and to the credit of Tulsi Gabbard, those two clowns no longer have security clearance, right? But he's risking his peace plans being sabotaged again if he gets sucked into this war with Iran.
We are against globalism, we are against imperialism, and we fight for working families. Only peace can make America great again. Only peace can make America great again. And we are out here to build the movement this country desperately needs.
People have been very excited to hear something that isn't directly partisan, but rather demanding things that they need and want as people. It seems to me like people are very receptive of a message that is less oriented towards telling them which team to vote for.
I don't want my child to be going in a war that's not ours. Our tax dollars not coming in our country. You know, the infrastructure is crappy. There's holes all over Chicago. You know, I'm sick of it.
A few people walking by, they look at the banner and they're trying to figure out if we're on the red team or the blue team, and they can't quite figure it out. Well, we're not on any team. We're on the team of the American working families. We're on the team of the American people. We're on the peace team. That's what team we're on.
Talks between Trump and Putin are the most important thing in the world right now. Way more important than anything these stupid rallies have been demanding. Hands off this, hands off that. We need hands off the thermonuclear button. Hands off the red button.
We've had protests out in Chicago over the last couple of days that have been oriented towards stopping this person or being against this team, and that's not something that people want. People want jobs, people want their roads fixed, people want health care.
Now when?
People want an end to war. They don't want team sports.
Oh, Ukrainians. Right there, you see them?
Oh.
Around the world and stop the bombings, stop the wars, shut down the Pentagon and the military-industrial complex, and start investing in working families. Our leaders are loyal to a global financial system. They're loyal to Wall Street. They're loyal to imperialism and globalism. They're not loyal to American people. And we have got to build a movement to fight for America's working families. Only peace can make America great again. Only peace can make America great again.
We need to build jobs. We need to build schools. No more closed schools in Chicago. No more closed everything in Chicago. No more poor people in Chicago. No more homelessness in Chicago. We need a government of action to fight for working families.
Iran is not just Iran anymore. Iran is part of the world. Iran is part of BRICS. They're an ally of China, an ally of Russia. If he wants his legacy, and I think he does, to be peace and nuclear disarmament between all the superpowers, then he cannot allow himself to be manipulated by his enemies into launching a war against Iran.
We need peace in this world. I want America to thrive. I want the U.S. to thrive. It's our time to thrive. The American people need to thrive. Not the privatized banks. They're the ones that are winning. They're the ones that are loving us fight against each other.
All these clowns out here demonstrated against him with Trump derangement syndrome. Hands off this, hands off that. They actually even say hands off NATO. Right? They're trying to protect this dangerous, aggressive military alliance. We need to tell Trump, hands off the button. Hands off the nuclear button. The fact that he has restored diplomatic relations between the two largest thermonuclear powers in the history of the world, right? That's the most important thing going on in the world right now. That has to succeed. That's what everybody should be talking about. I don't care what you think about him or his party or the other party, right? We have to be supporting him on this mission of stopping the countdown to World War III. So we're out here to say peace with Russia, no war with Iran, and hands off the little red button.
We're building for our July 12th conference. So right now we're just trying to have the word out in Chicago.
We need to look to countries like China, who are actively eliminating poverty. We shouldn't be competing with them, we should be copying them.
Bombing Yemen will not make America great again. Sending weapons to Ukraine will not make America great again. Only peace can make America great again. And it's time that the working families of this country got the support they need and the government began to invest in America and not a global machinery of death. Build some roads, build some highways, build some schools, build some hospitals, and stop dropping bombs around the world and stop destroying countries. Lift those sanctions, start making some trade deals, negotiate, invest, build a new world, invest in human beings. We, human beings with our creativity and brilliance, we are the thing that creates wealth and makes life better. No species has ever done what human beings have done. We are creative
We are innovative, and we need a government that invests in the people, not in the Pentagon and the machinery of death.
Hands off the button. Hands off the button. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Peace with Russia, no war with Iran. Hands off the button.
All right. So yeah, I just want to show you all that because we are working very, very, very hard to make the peace talks happen. We have been the heat in the street for the peace talks. Gabby, I love the team too. All of our awesome members were in those videos, right? Noah's in the videos, and John McCarthy's in the video, and Penny's in the video, Gabby's in the video, and my goodness, it was just, Briggy, and oh man, it was just so many great people. If I start naming, I'm going to start forgetting people. I mean, there's just so many awesome, awesome folks. You look at that video, it's our crew of dedicated anti-imperialists who are out there, and you can join this crew too. You can become part of the movement. We need you. We need you. We need people to sign up and be part of this. And we have a dedicated group of people that are ready to push for anti-imperialism. So, yeah, I just think about all that we've been able to accomplish. And I guess I do have a couple more things I want to say. First of all, people are comparing this to Nixon in China, right? Because Nixon went to China in 1973, and that was the beginning of China pivoting to align with the U.S. in the Cold War. But that really it didn't really start there. It really started in 1961 when Khrushchev denounced China and withdrew China's aid withdrew the Soviet aid from China. At that point, China was a very, very poor country, and they had just started with their revolution to start industrializing. And with Soviet help, they built the first steel mills China had ever had, the first power plants they'd ever had. And they just started, and then Stalin died. And after Stalin died, Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union who came after Stalin, he went on a tirade against Stalin, and he denounced Stalin. And he launched de-Stalinization, they called it, trying to reverse the policies of Stalin. And China at first liked de-Stalinization, but then they saw pretty quickly that de-Stalinization meant pandering to the United States. That it basically meant, putting anti-imperialism on hold around the world because the USA had the atomic bomb. Khrushchev came out with the doctrine, what he called the three peacefuls: peaceful coexistence between capitalist countries and socialist countries, peaceful competition between capitalist countries and socialist countries, meaning that the socialist countries would just focus on producing more goods, right? And proving that socialism was more efficient by producing more goods. And then peaceful transition from capitalism to socialism, because by proving that socialist countries were better at producing more goods, the Western countries would eventually see socialism was the way, and then they would just peacefully transition to socialism. And Mao heard that, and he wasn't going to accept it. He said that was not. That was a complete revision, that the capitalist countries, the imperialists, would always be trying to destroy the socialist countries. And so there was never, even though there might not be war, there was never really going to be just peaceful coexistence, right? The capitalism and socialism were rival systems, and the imperialists would always be trying to crush the socialist countries. On top of that, the socialist countries, because they were surrounded, because they were starting at a much lower level of development, the idea that they would just be able to just produce goods better than the capitalist countries, and that was the way that they would prove things. The notion of peaceful competition, that they would just kind of outdo the United States in industrial production, that wasn't realistic. And then the idea that the Western countries would see that socialist countries produced a lot of goods, and then based on that, they would just voluntarily give up their system and move towards socialism. That was not a realistic formula. That was not realistic. And, China called that revisionism. And they denounced the Soviet Union for calling that. And then the Soviet Union responded by pulling out all of their aid to China. And so China, they were devastated. I mean, buildings were left half built. All kinds of engineers and scientists were pulled out of the country. And China was a very poor country. And so they tried at first to be ultra communist, right? And they had the Great Leap Forward. They said, well, we don't need Soviet aid. And they tried to very quickly industrialize with a program called the Great Leap Forward that was not successful. And it didn't work out. And then they had the Cultural Revolution, because there were people in the Chinese government that agreed with the Soviet Union and wanted to go along with the Soviet Union and such. And so there was an event called the Cultural Revolution. But after a while, it just became clear that China was really, really poor, and the Soviet Union was not going to improve relations with China. The Soviet Union was hostile to them. And so the Soviet Union, with its hostility, China started looking for friends elsewhere. In Czechoslovakia in 1968, there was an anti-communist uprising. It was called the Prague Spring. A leader of the Czech Communist Party who was against the Soviet Union took power. Most of the people in Czechoslovakia didn't support him, but he was supported by the United States. He was later proven to be a CIA asset, a guy named Dubček. He came to power, and the Soviet military went to Czechoslovakia to remove him. And at the time that happened, China condemned the Soviet Union for sending its military into Czechoslovakia. And they called it Soviet imperialism. Those were the words that they used. And then in Angola, which is an African country that at the time was a colony of Portugal, there was an ongoing guerrilla uprising led by the MPLA, the Movement for the Liberation of the People of Angola, the MPLA of Angola. It was funded by the Soviet Union. They were giving guns to the African people of Angola to fight against Portuguese colonialism. Well, China suddenly announced that the MPLA, the Soviet, the communist group in Angola that was fighting against the United States and against Portugal, that they were no good. They were just agents of the Soviets. So China began giving aid to another rebel group that claimed to be communists that was made up of CIA agents. It was called UNITA, the Union for the Total Liberation of Angola. And this group UNITA was led by a guy who was a CIA agent, a guy named Jonas Savimbi. And he claimed to be a Maoist communist. And then in the 80s, he claimed to be a Jeffersonian Democrat. He was a friend of Ronald Reagan, and he was literally a cannibal. Jonas Savimbi, you can read about him. I'm not making this up. That is not hyperbole. He ate people, right? He was a people eater. He was a literal cannibal, Jonas Savimbi, who was backed by not by the Soviet Union, but by the United States against the MPLA of Angola. You can read about Jonas Savimbi. I mean, just an absolute monster that the USA backed, this rival rebel group that was being backed by the United States against the communists in Angola. Well, China started supporting them also, starting in 1969 in the name of being against the Soviet Union. And then it was in 1973 that Richard Nixon went to China to meet with Mao. And when Richard Nixon went to China, there was an op-ed in the New York Times supporting it by David Rockefeller. And the Rockefeller family were some of the biggest supporters of Richard Nixon going to China. Why? Why is that the Rockefellers supported it? Well, China didn't have any oil. And if China was going to increase its industrial capacity and it was going to have to purchase oil, and the Rockefellers sold oil, and China couldn't buy oil from the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union was not their friend anymore. And the Rockefellers wanted to make money selling oil. Plus, the Rockefellers, they were always of the long-term strategic thinking, right? So if you can divide, there's a divide between the two major communist countries. Let's align with one of them. And it was the Trilateral Commission of the strategic policies of Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski, both of whom were funded by the Rockefellers, the wealthy oil banking family in America. They're the ones that developed the strategy of sucking up to China and having China be an ally against the Soviet Union. And that's why to this day, Henry Kissinger is loved by China. A lot of leftists in America hate Henry Kissinger because of his role in the Vietnam War, his role in the coup in Chile, and the dictatorship of Pinochet. But China loves Henry Kissinger because he's the one who convinced Richard Nixon, and with the support of the Rockefellers, to go to China. And he's the one who largely engineered China getting American investment. So 1973, Richard Nixon went to China, and Richard Nixon met with Mao Zedong. And what's really interesting, and this is very, very important, right? When Richard Nixon met with Mao, there's a quote, from Mao, and I want to get it exactly right. Mao said this to Richard Nixon. Mao said, "I like rightists. I am comparatively happy when these people on the right come into power." That is a direct quote from Mao to Richard Nixon. Now, that's a pretty bold statement. Mao's a communist leader, and he said, "I like rightists. I like rightists, and I am comparatively happy when these people on the right come into power." What was he getting at? Well, apparently, what Mao was referring to was that no Democrat would ever have been able to go to China because the Democrats were always being accused of being soft on communism. So it took a conservative. No one was ever going to call Richard Nixon a communist. He was a right-wing conservative. He'd been a Joe McCarthy supporter. He had been working with the FBI to crush the Black Panthers. Richard Nixon had escalated the Vietnam War. So no one was ever going to call Richard Nixon a communist. So he was able to establish diplomatic relations with China. Or he didn't formally establish relations. That didn't come until 1979, but he was able to start the process and become the first U.S. president to visit China since the revolution because he was a conservative. And Richard Nixon went to China, and he was opposed by his own party in doing so. A big part of the Republican Party at that time was what was called the John Birch Society. Now, the John Birch Society is very irrelevant at this point, but in the early 60s, the John Birch Society was a very big, important organization among Republicans. It was an anti-communist activist group that believed communism was a Wall Street conspiracy and was the main enemy. And they pointed to the fact that a lot of wealthy liberals worked with communists, and they believed communism was kind of a Wall Street conspiracy. And they were against any trade or diplomatic relations with any communist countries. And so when Richard Nixon went to China, the John Birch Society, they started a billboard campaign across the country with a picture of a syringe, and it said, "Cut off China." Basically saying that China was responsible for the heroin trade, which was absurd. The heroin, coming into the United States was not coming from China at that point. China had crushed, drug dealers. And I mean, that's just an outrageous smear. But the John Birch Society, that was a really big part of being a conservative, being a Republican at that point. They were against Nixon going to China, but Nixon went to China. After Nixon went to China, the USA set up the U.S. Foreign Interests Office in Beijing. And that was not, they didn't have there was no embassy, but there was the U.S. Foreign Interests Office. And who headed the U.S. Foreign Interests Office? George Herbert Walker Bush, who eventually became CIA director, vice president, and president of the United States. And then his son also became a president. And George Herbert Walker Bush lived in China for a year at least, I think 2 years, as the head of the U.S. Foreign Interests Office in Beijing, and even had a face-to-face meeting with Mao Zedong as the representative of the United States in China, running the U.S. Foreign Interests Office. Very interesting. And then at that point, it was then Jimmy Carter. After the death of Mao, Mao died in 1976. And in the final years of Mao's life, Mao was so old, he wasn't really making decisions at that point. George Herbert Walker Bush, when he met with him, Mao could barely speak to him. Mao would forget the words that he was saying, and he would have to like write Chinese characters, and his translators would have to remind him of words. And he wasn't all there. He was very old at that point. But at that point, you know, one of Mao's top advisors had been a guy named Lin Biao, and Lin Biao had died. Lin Biao, I'll show you a picture. I go over this history. You know, I have my book on the new communist movement, you know, and I go over this history because it had a lot to do with communist groups in America and how they operated. But this was Mao's top general, Lin Biao. And Lin Biao was the guy who was responsible for the Cultural Revolution. But Lin Biao, he was removed from power in 1971. Now, the official story is he tried to kill Mao, and then he tried to flee to the Soviet Union. It's very mysterious. So after Lin Biao's death, Mao's wife, this is Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, she and 3 other people who were called the Gang of Four, they became the people that were really running things in China, the Gang of Four. And they were Mao's wife and 3 other people. And they were awful people. They were wreckers. And every time the Chinese economy started to get going again and started to move, they would call another action and freeze production, and they would tear down somebody else. And they had campaigns against women's makeup. They had campaigns against Western music. They had big rallies at the North Korean border because they thought that Kim Il-sung was a revisionist pig because he did business with the Soviet Union. And they had protests against North Korea at the North Korean border. And they were wreckers, basically, the Gang of Four. They were people who persecuted people for a living, and China's economy couldn't get going. There's a very famous story that they point to as an example of how bad the Gang of Four was. It was called the Glass Snail Incident. And what happened was there was a group of Chinese students who, after Nixon went to China, they were invited to America. And they went to America and they visited a factory that made color televisions. And they were then given as a gift by their American hosts a glass snail, right? A nice glass snail. So they came back to China, and they proposed that China start making color televisions, because the communist countries in the Soviet bloc, they couldn't get color televisions because they were blockaded by the United States, but they could buy them from China. And their idea was that China could get the technology to make color TVs, and because they were part of the communist world, they could sell them to the communist bloc, right? And that was an opening for China to make a lot of money, because Western capitalist countries wouldn't sell color TVs to communist countries. But China, that did business with America, but was also going to be doing business with the communist countries, they could do that. And that was their proposal. And, you know, a lot of people in China thought it was a great idea. But Mao's wife opposed it. And she got on television and she denounced these students and said that it was disgusting that they would ever want China to make a disgusting thing like a color television. It's decadent capitalist invention. They'd never want a color TV. And on top of that, she claimed that the snail that the students had been given was making fun of China. It was saying that China was a slow country, like a snail. And she went after these students and attacked them. And then Zhou Enlai, who was the foreign minister, he stepped in and he kind of protected the students. But it was a horrible incident. These students had a great idea that China could make color TVs, and they had their lives destroyed. It was cancel culture. They got canceled on TV by the leader of the country, the president's wife. The first lady gets on TV and says these are bad students because they want China to make TVs. And that the Gang of Four, this faction that was in power in the final years of Mao's life, they believed that China could become a fully communist country in poverty. They believed that China could somehow have full communism in poverty. And that is not correct. The Critique of the Goethe Program by Marx makes very clear the only way you can have a society with no inequality is there has to be vast abundance. We're not trying to make everybody equal. We're trying to rationally organize the economy so that the springs of cooperative wealth can flow more abundantly, and that there's enough to go around for everybody, and then the need for anyone to hoard anything goes away. You cannot create equality in poverty. As long as there is scarcity in poverty, some will have and some will have not. And that is a reality that Marx very well understood. And the whole reason we have the state, and the whole reason feudalism existed before capitalism and slavery existed before feudalism, it was because of conditions of scarcity. And the more abundance you have, the more freedom you can have, and the more equality you can have. And the only way you can create a totally communist world, a world without any inequality, it has to be a world where there's so much wealth that there's no need for anyone to hoard anything. There's just enough for everybody. And in such a world, there wouldn't be any coercion either. People would be able to just do what they feel like doing because there's enough for everybody. And technology would have to advance, and there'd have to be a vast abundance of wealth. That's the understanding of what communism, the higher stage of communism that Karl Marx wrote about, that's what he was talking about. It was a post-scarcity society. It reminds me of some of what, there used to be years ago, there was this thing called the Venus Project. They were making online documentaries about, they had this vision of a technology-based world, a resource-based. They were kind of hinting to the same thing, that the road to freedom and equality is abundance. And Marx understood this, but the Gang of Four, they didn't think it. They thought they could create a totally equal society in poverty with force, that if you're just forceful enough, if you just are authoritarian and you just force people and you just shove ideology down their throat, they'll just be good. It doesn't work like that. The basis of eliminating inequality, the basis of eliminating the state, and the basis of eliminating social hierarchies, the basis of that is abundance. And as long as you have restrictions on abundance, you cannot reach the higher stage. And that is the problem with capitalism, is that capitalism is a system where technology creates poverty, and that there's this problem of glut and tendency of the falling rate of profits and overproduction, poverty amid plenty, that holds back our ability, right? We have to get over a situation, an economic system where self-driving cars would be a bad thing, so that we can create vast abundance, and then we can reach a stateless, classless world, right? That's the idea. Right? The idea is to create a world of vast abundance and unleash the productive forces. And the Gang of Four didn't believe in that. They didn't believe in that. They didn't believe in that. So they were in power. But then after Mao died, Deng Xiaoping, who was on the Long March with Mao, who'd worked with Mao throughout his whole life, who'd been sent to the countryside, but then he'd been rehabilitated. He'd been brought back into office in the final years of Mao's life. Deng Xiaoping took power. The military brought Deng Xiaoping to power. And Deng Xiaoping, he then announced that the Cultural Revolution was over. And in 1978, he announced that China was having the reform and opening up, that they were going to bring in foreign investment, and they were going to utilize the market to strengthen their overall socialist system. And that is when Jimmy Carter brought Deng Xiaoping to the White House, 1979, and officially a U.S. embassy, or a U.S. embassy opened in Beijing, and a Chinese embassy representing the People's Republic of China opened in Washington, D.C. But there was a really important thing that had to happen first, which is that the USA had to recognize the Chinese government in Beijing, because until then, see, what is the government on Taiwan? What is it called? What's it called? It's called the Republic of China. And until Nixon, I believe, the United States government acted like the government on Taiwan represented all of China, and that the government on the Chinese mainland was illegitimate. And it was, I believe it was Richard Nixon that withdrew that recognition. And then they formally recognized that the government in Beijing was the government of China, and that the U.S. government, in order to have diplomatic relations with China, the U.S. government had to say there's only one China and its capital is Beijing, and that the government on Taiwan is not the government of China, and that Taiwan is part of China. And that had to be recognized by the United States. And the United States was able to start investing into China. And that was a complicated process. And China turning against the USSR in the Cold War, it was a pretty big game changer. For example, in Afghanistan, the Soviet Union, was fought by Osama bin Laden, was fought by these terrorists. Well, China, at that point, the Soviet Union had turned against them. So they aligned with the United States in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. And around the world, China generally took U.S. positions. They aligned with the United States on foreign policy issues during the 1980s. And that helped isolate the Soviet Union. That largely set the stage for the fall of the Soviet Union. However, what happened in 1989, right? In 1989, that's when all the communist governments of the Eastern Bloc were falling, right? East Germany fell, Poland fell, Czechoslovakia fell, and they were falling with these color revolutions where the children of the party elite would go out and protest and riot, and there'd be big protests, for freedom, for democracy by the children of the party elite, the university students. And then, the protests would create enough unrest that a section of the military that was aligned with the United States would take over and overthrow the communist government. And that was the color revolution model, is that you get a whole bunch of college students to go out into the street, a lot of whom are not against communism, a lot of whom say, well, we just want socialism with a human face, or we just want reform, or we want this, we want that. They want all kinds of things. And you create a big scene where the people are out in the streets, and then that creates the cover for the sections of the military that are compromised by the U.S. to overthrow the government. And that happened all over Eastern Europe, Romania, Czechoslovakia, all these places. They tried to do it in China, and that was the Tiananmen events of 1989. And it failed. And they followed the exact same playbook. They got a whole bunch of students to gather in Tiananmen Square, and the students were there protesting about all kinds of stuff. And, some of them were Maoists. They wanted to go back to the communist policies of Mao. They wanted to go back to the policies of the Mao era. They didn't like the reform and opening up. And something that the New York Times has had to admit is that a lot of the students who gathered in Tiananmen Square in 1989, they were there because they were racist. They didn't want black people to study in China. They were mad about a scholarship program. The Chinese government had a scholarship program to allow black Africans to come and study in China. And all across China, in the lead up to the protests in 1989, there had been lynchings where they had gone and killed these black students because they were dating local Chinese women, etc. So they don't want to talk about that. But, a lot of the students in protesting in Tiananmen Square were racist. They didn't want black people in China. And some of them were Maoists, hardcore neo-Maoists. And some of them probably did want the Western system. And they did have some kind of statue that looked like the Statue of Liberty. But there were more pictures of Mao in Tiananmen Square during the protests of 1989 than there had been since the Cultural Revolution. And that's how color revolutions work. It's about everything. It's about whatever you want. It's about everyone gets the memo, go and protest. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the CIA is scheming. And what happened was the students were protesting, and they'd set up this encampment in Beijing, and they were protesting. And then on the other side of the city, there was violence. And so the military declared martial law. And then the students dispersed peacefully. And after the students cleared the square and dispersed peacefully, then there was a whole lot of violence that followed. A lot of violence followed. There was a lot of shooting and killing, but there were deaths on both sides. Hundreds of Chinese soldiers were killed. There were snipers on rooftops with guns, and it was a bloodbath, afterwards. And for 2 weeks, there was armed battles in Beijing. But it wasn't this narrative that we have of the Tiananmen Square events, that the Chinese government was there and they just saw the students protesting and then just ran over them with tanks. And that's not what happened, right? It's not what happened. What happened was that the students were there around all kinds of political causes. They dispersed peacefully. And then there was an armed battle that was really an attempted coup. There was an attempted coup d'etat, right? That it was following the color revolution playbook. One section of the military was going to come in and overthrow communism, and another section of the military stopped it from happening. And there was military on military violence. That actually happened. Sections of the Chinese military were fighting other sections of the military, and it was prevented. At the end of the day, the Chinese Communist Party was back in power. they were back in power. I mean, it's wild. In U.S. News, they interviewed, a representative of the Chinese government, and they said to him, they said, we have video showing you massacred thousands of students. And he said, we would like to see that video. They've never produced that video. There's no video. They didn't massacre thousands of students. That's not what happened, right? And that it was totally an attempted color revolution. But in China, it failed. And that sent a message to China that even if you play ball with the United States, they're still going to try to overthrow you. The U.S. relationship with China is complicated. But the other thing is that while China was getting U.S. investment, that whole time that China was getting U.S. investment, what happened? They were building up their state sector. And they built Huawei Technologies, which was a huge corporation, a state-controlled mega corporation. That was a cell phone and telecommunications manufacturer that they set up. They built the world's largest steel industry. And yes, they're bringing in foreign investment, but the whole time they're building up their own productive capacity. The Chinese space program has expanded, and China realized that, America, they're not very good at building trains. And so China started their China Railway Corporation. China makes the fastest trains in the world at this point. They go over 200 miles an hour. Right. All of this. And meanwhile, the USA is trading with China, but at the same time, the USA is working against them and, trying to break Tibet away, funding Tibet separatists that don't like them, trying to destabilize China. And it's a bizarre world that we live in. But, the way China was turned against the Soviet Union was based on very unique circumstances. It was because at the time that China had just had their revolution, they were dependent on the Soviet Union. And Khrushchev tried to tell China what to do. He thought because he was helping them out and paying their purse strings that he would tell them what to do. And China wasn't going to accept that. China and Russia's relationship today is nothing like that. It is absolutely nothing like that. At this point, the Russian government is not led by Marxists and communists anymore. It's led by, anti-imperialists, Russian nationalists, Orthodox Christians. The communists are a big part of the government, but they're not the ruling party. And Russia has an economy that is centered around state-controlled oil and gas, Gazprom and Rosneft, two state-controlled energy companies. And China is now the second largest economy in the world, and it is an industrial powerhouse with the biggest telecommunications manufacturer in the world, the largest creator of train technology in the world, the world's largest steel industry. What do they need to run their industries? They need oil and natural gas. So Russia sells oil and gas to China. China buys oil and gas from Russia. And it's a match made in heaven. And they're both countries that have been subjected to sanctions by the United States, that have faced U.S. Regime change efforts and U.S. demonization and color revolutions and all. And so they get it, right? And that they may not agree on a lot of things, and they have a different ideology, a different perspective. They have a history. They were together at one point out of World War II, but then they divided. But now their relationship is an economic relationship. And it's based on the fact that they're both Eurasian countries. They're the two Eurasian countries that are largely land-based economies, right? They're not based on the ocean. They're based on the land, big chunks of land on the world island of Eurasia. And they trade with each other. China's very proud of the history of the Silk Road, and Russia is very proud of their history as a vibrant civilization, and that they trade with each other as part of this thriving new economy. And they have a relationship with many countries around the world. And Russia provides fertilizer to countries around the world. And China builds infrastructure around the world. Many African countries get fertilizer from Russia, get aid from Russia in building up their mining corporations, etc. Many countries get aid from China to build up highways and railroads and airports and infrastructure and hospitals. And that many countries throughout the world are part of this new economy centered around Russia and China, which includes the market, which includes the market, but these are economies that are largely state controlled, where the state is planning and organizing the economy to oversee economic growth, right? It doesn't have the chaos of the market. They're not stuck in the Cold War. They're not doing what China was doing during the Cultural Revolution and trying to use the state to make everyone equal in poverty. They're not doing that, but they are planning and centralizing the economy in order, and they have a government that understands its job is to deliver economic growth. And right, that's what the Chinese Communist Party does every year. They have a GDP growth target, and they're constantly explaining, this is how we've raised people's incomes. This is how we've increased people's living standards. The Chinese Communist Party has to constantly be justifying its rule by explaining and showing that it is substantially improving people's lives. That's the kind of government we should have over here. We should have a state that is constantly showing us they made our lives better, constantly coming back to us every quarter, explaining how we got wealthier, we got healthier, we got better education, our communities improved. A government should have a responsibility to serve the people and to oversee the expansion and productivity of people's lives. The state should be involved in making a better society. Statecraft. That's when you saw me on that video talking to Putin. That's what I said. You showed the American people a form of statecraft. That's the point. So I wanted to talk about a couple other things while we're here. I wanted to just touch on a couple other things. I see that we've got a couple Rumble rants that have come in, or one Rumble rant from Penny. Questions can come in the form of Rumble rants, or you can Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22. I'll put that on the screen. Those are the two ways we can accept questions, in the form of Rumble rants or Cash App. But I wanted to touch on a couple of things. First of all, I guess I wanted to talk about Trump's talks with North Korea. Why was Trump not successful in his first term when he went to North Korea? Because that was historic when Donald Trump visited North Korea. It was historic, and it was really a game changer. And what Donald Trump did was he visited North Korea. He met with Kim Jong-un in Singapore. Then I think they had another meeting in Vietnam, and then he ended up visiting North Korea. That was a huge game changer, and it was a really big deal. And there was a lot of potential to improve relations with North Korea, but then it just stopped. And why did it stop? It stopped because it was actively being sabotaged by the American government. John Bolton and Mike Pompeo were with Trump doing it, and they didn't believe in it. And John Bolton even said that Libyan options were on the table. Well, we all know what happened to Gaddafi, right? So why would you say that? You're about to go negotiate with a country, and you're saying, oh, yeah, it might end up like Libya. That's not something you say. John Bolton was actively trying to sabotage it. And it got very little attention here in the United States, but in Spain, Spain has diplomatic relations with North Korea. In Spain, a number of individuals linked to the United States attacked the North Korean embassy. And they went into the North Korean embassy and stole computers, and they damaged property, right? And it got almost no attention in American media, but it was a really big deal in Spain that while the negotiations were happening, a bunch of US-linked individuals attacked the North Korean embassy. And it was clear that the deep state, the intelligence apparatus, was trying to undermine Trump. And that's why Trump has stripped Mike Pompeo and John Bolton of their security clearances. They're not only are they not in his administration, they don't even get to see classified information anymore. They've been stripped of their security clearances because they tried to undermine the negotiation process on the Korean Peninsula. Why did they do that? Well, they did that because of this. Because back to 1989, all across Eastern Europe, in the lead up to the fall of the Soviet Union, all of these countries, Poland, Romania, a lot of these countries started getting friendly to the United States, having market reforms, liberalizing, getting bank loans from American banks, etc. And that then resulted in these countries having color revolutions and being overthrown. And there was an assumption in 1989, the 1980s, the same thing would happen in China and Vietnam. right? That, you know, that just like Romania, Czechoslovakia, just like Russia itself and the Soviet Union, they would start doing business with America, they'd start having liberal reforms, and then the communist system would fall. And that worked out very well across Eastern Europe, but it didn't happen in China, and it didn't happen in Vietnam. And in fact, today, the Vietnamese Communist Party is way stronger than it was in the 80s. And today, the Chinese Communist Party is way stronger than it was in the 70s, right? When Zhou Enlai, the founder of the People's Republic of China, who was like an ally of Mao, the foreign minister, when he died, his funeral in Beijing in 1976 turned into an anti-communist riot, because all these college students, all these engineers, all these professionals and smart people really supported Zhou Enlai because he protected them from the Cultural Revolution. And there was an anti-communist riot in 1976 at the funeral of Zhou Enlai. However, in the 80s, the Chinese government started winning those people back. And it was the engineers and the scientists and the high-achieving smart people who became the biggest supporters of the government. And because the government helped them unleash their talent and their abilities. And you know, as a result of the reform and opening up, today in China, there's a lot more support for the Communist Party, especially among the smarter people, the educated people, the skilled professionals and others. They tend to be very supportive of the party. And that's a big change, right? And the reform and opening up didn't lead to the Chinese Communist Party being overthrown. It led to the Chinese Communist Party getting stronger. And the same in Vietnam. With the socialism-oriented market economy, the Vietnamese Communist Party has presided over what the World Economic Forum calls an economic miracle in Vietnam, raising so many people up out of poverty and bringing in computer technology, and they've done miracles in Vietnam, and the Vietnamese Communist Party is stronger. So there's a fear on the part of the CIA that if they're able to have a reform and opening up in North Korea, which is what they want to do, bring in foreign investment, bring in, and North Korea can start doing business. There's a fear of what that could mean. North Korea is an economic powerhouse waiting to happen. Those mountains in North Korea are full of minerals, and most North Koreans can speak more than one language. And North Korea already makes its own cell phones in-house. North Korea is full of economic potential. They just have been sanctioned into oblivion. Basically, any company that trades with North Korea can't trade with America. And I mean, it's pretty insane. But if those sanctions are lifted, there's going to be a huge explosion of economic growth. And, you know, if you listen to various people, Jim Rogers, for example, the legendary investor who lives in Singapore, they know this. They want to make money off of North Korea. They want America to get in on some of that action. When North Korea gives up its nuclear weapons, and it's got enough security and protection from Russia and from China that its nuclear weapons won't be messed with, that they won't be invaded or something, that they'll give up their nuclear weapons, rejoin the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and then it's going to be a bonanza in North Korea. There's going to be all kinds of money made. And the fear of Mike Pompeo and John Bolton is that that will make the Korean Workers' Party stronger. Well, it will. And so what? So what? The Korean Workers' Party has led the people in the northern half of the Korean Peninsula to endure hardship that we can't even imagine. And at the same time that they electrified and they wiped out illiteracy, and then they faced a blockade and threats, they stood with the Palestinians, and they stood with the people of South Africa in the fight against apartheid. And I mean, North Korea's record of solidarity with countries around the world is amazing. And the Korean Workers' Party has been able to rally them and defend them. And yes, if they become more popular because they're able to negotiate lifting the sanctions and bringing trade into into North Korea, that's just a reality. That's just something that the U.S. has to deal with. North Korea is not going away. Russia is not going away. China is not going away. And that the USA needs to stop being so goddamn autistic, right? Autistic people, one stereotype of autistic people. And I mean, I am I know that this is just a stereotype. I'm being facetious. I know, autism is a neurological condition that I'm not qualified to speak on, but whatever. But a stereotype of autistic people is that they don't understand that other people exist, right? They're very, it's not that they're intentionally selfish or rude. They just don't understand, oh, other people have feelings, other people exist, right? They don't get the nuances of thinking about other people's needs. And that seems to be how the United States is, right? Russia is not supposed to exist. China is not supposed to exist. North Korea is not supposed to exist. Iran is not supposed to exist. Well, guess what? They exist, and they're not going anywhere. And we would be a lot better off as a country if we acknowledge that they exist and learn to get along with them and do business with them in a way that benefited us. But we still hold on to this idea that, no, we can't acknowledge they exist. No, they don't have the right to exist. They need to be hit with sanctions. We need to drive them off the market. People shouldn't be buying their cell phones from Huawei. They should buy them from us, from Apple. People shouldn't buy their oil from Gazprom and Rosneft. No, they should buy it from us. And this is this childish, the whole world for me, the whole world for me. No one else gets to exist. Well, buddy, other countries are going to exist, and they're not going to go away. And there's a big chunk of this economy that would benefit from trading with them. It is only the monopolies, the big imperialist monopolies, the financial class, the Rockefellers, the DuPonts, the Carnegies. They're the ones that are thinking, no, we've got to be at the center of the world. We got to be at the top of the pyramid forever. That's where we've got to be. We have got to sit at the top of the pyramid forever. And these other countries don't have the right to exist. Well, they're wrong. These other countries do have the right to exist, and they're going to keep existing. They're going to keep existing. And we need to develop the pro-growth sector of the U.S. economy that understands this and would rather make a deal and trade with them, right? And that's how I'm viewing this whole Russia talks, right? I talk about Donald Trump and the divisions in the ruling class. And that's how I see it. And I think that there is potential. I think that the Ukraine war is likely to end in the next few days. And that's because there is a section of the U.S. ruling class that is kind of understanding that Russia is going to exist and that maybe we can get a better deal with them. And that's an opening. And again, are there people in the Trump administration that want peace with Russia for bad reasons? Absolutely. Does that matter? No. If we can get this war in Ukraine to end, that would be amazing. Lives would stop being taken every day on the battlefield. There would be peace and there would be trade between the USA and Russia, and we'd become more connected with Russia economically, and you're a lot less likely to go to war with somebody if you're doing business with them. That would be a good thing. We need the Ukraine war to end. So, the right attitude to look at this is to say, look, there may be people here with bad intentions or whatever, but there's a potential for something good. There's a potential for something good to happen right now, and we need to do our best to push for it to happen. And nobody has done more to make it happen. No American voice has been louder than ours. We are the Center for Political Innovation. We have been the main advocates in the streets of peace with Russia. So when it happens, you should thank us, because we have been outspoken and relentless in making it happen. So why don't we do the roll call? Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is here? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. I'll start calling people out. This is that part of the show. Ryan in Kansas City. Alex in Brazil. Phil in Miami, Florida. Phil Sang. Welcome, Phil. Chad in Spokane, Washington. St. David's, Bermuda. Patrick in Tucson, Arizona. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. John McCarthy in Chicago. Welcome, John. Names and locations. Names and locations. Jeff in Delaware. David Rennie in Hamilton, Ontario. Ian Chester in England. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Penny in Minnesota. Nat in Vancouver, Washington State. Anthony in Texas. Gabby in Chicago, Timoshenko in St. Louis. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Good times. Good times. Anybody else? Names and locations. Now we have one super chat from Penny, and I will certainly answer that. But if people want to send more Rumble rants, that would be great. Just send more questions. I have been playing music on these streams lately. And we have been out there pushing for the war in Ukraine to end. And we haven't given up. So you could say we've been holding the fort. And there's an old Union song called Hold the Fort. And so I thought that would be an appropriate song to play on the stream tonight. I like to play music. So this is called Hold the Fort. This is a Union song called Hold the Fort. So I'm going to download the Union song Hold the Fort, and then we'll play Hold the Fort. So, all right, let me see if I can just get a version of Hold the Fort, right? Just downloading. That'll be a good song to play because it is a matter of withstanding. Larry Chu in Albany, New York, Hempcar, Jacob in Wisconsin. It is a matter of holding the fort because, the kind of work that we do often, it's not an immediate payout, right? It takes a while to see the fruits of your labor, right? And that you have to hold to your principles. You have to hold steadfast and you have to do the work, right? The people out in Chicago that are building for our convention right now, they're working hard, right? Ellie's out there in Chicago working hard, and Gabby and Nunso and everybody, they're working hard to get those door knockers on the door because we know we have to build our big convention in July. So you got to hold the fort. You got to endure, right? You got to work hard because that payout is coming down the road, that we need to build this anti-imperialist movement. It's not optional, right? If we're going to have a future, we need to build a movement for anti-imperialism. There is no other way. There's no alternative. And so we're going to fill up that auditorium in July. We're going to do it. So here we go. Hold the fort.
Victory
All right. That was absolutely great. And we got to hold the fort. Look, folks, if Russia and Ukraine, if that war can end and the sanctions can be lifted on Russia, then the USA can become more attached to Russia economically, which means that that new economy that I've been describing, that is pro-growth, that is not part of the Wall Street Malthusian degrowth, global dying financialist empire, that economy can become more connected over here. And the section of US society that wants to prosper and grow along with the BRICS countries can start to flourish. Again, we're not apologists for Trump. There's plenty of things Trump is doing that we don't like, but Trump has created an opening. There is political space for something to happen. And we at CPI, we're trying to figure out different ways we can intervene. Now, we got some different projects in the works coming up, right? We were focused on building our convention that's coming up, but we got some other projects in the works about how we can use this opening of Trump negotiating with Russia and all of that. How can we use this opening to try and get something good going? So make a point of planning to come to the convention. This will be the biggest event of the year. It's going to be the most important thing going on. So please make a point of being there. Shout out to Phil, our member who is traveling right now. He's doing some important work. He's traveling. I saw him in the chat earlier, and we love our friend Phil. Our member, good friend Phil, who does activism and is on the road. We are, so there is a super chat. There's two. Oh, there's another one. Right. We've got two Rumble rants. One is, why are Western reporters so arrogant and desperate for juicy headlines while real leaders educate them gracefully? And that's Penny responding to that. I think it's worse than that, Penny. I think it's absolutely worse than that. When I hear U.S. media, whenever they talk to Trump about Russia, whenever they talk to Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, they're getting their talking points directly from the CIA, directly from the deep state and the regime change apparatus. It's not that they want a headline. They are assigned to push a pro-war agenda to make it seem like friendship and cooperation with Russia is a scandal, to push war with Iran. That's what you just heard in that Lavrov clip I played earlier. It's not simply they want a juicy headline. They are there. They are acting as regime change lobbyists. Their job is to demand war and demand hostility from our elected leaders. It is absolutely repugnant. They're not interested in what our leaders are doing to create peace. They're interested in the scandal of not being pro-war and not being hostile enough. And it's really sad to see that's what Western media outlets are, that they're basically just controlled. And that's what makes me angry when they call RT state media. Well, RT is technically not state media. It's a private company that gets subsidies, but it's not state media. But CNN is state media. CNN, all they do is demand war, right? And it's like they always say that mainstream media in the West is independent. Oh, it's so independent. Is it really? Is it really independent if they never challenge U.S. foreign policy narratives and they never acknowledge the children of, I've held up this image many times. You will never hear any Western media outlet ever acknowledge that Ukraine was bombing the people of the Donbass for 8 years straight. These children don't exist if you watch Western media. They don't exist. They don't count. Oh, they don't even acknowledge that this exists. If you listen to American media, you would have no clue that for the last 8 years, the Ukrainian government was murdering the children of Donbass, the Russian-speaking peoples of the Eastern republics. You'd never hear that, right? They don't even acknowledge it. It's not allowed to be part of the conversation. And and then they say, oh, well, Western media is independent, but media from China, that's state media. Give me a break. Give me a break. Frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. Now it's funny. Falker Frost says, you got a good Prairie Fire song for us afterwards. Now, Falker, so there was a YouTube channel that had put up this band that I like to play called Prairie Fire. They were the band of they were a rock and roll band, a folk rock and roll band associated with the Revolutionary Communist Party during the 1970s. And somebody put their music on their YouTube channel. And I started listening to it, and I really enjoyed it because the Revolutionary Communist Party during the mid 70s, they had an out of the movement to the masses approach, right? They were very much in a populist phase, and that led them to do some interesting things. Like they supported the anti-busing riots in Boston, and they supported the textbook riots against evolution in West Virginia, and that they really made a point of not being like the left, but trying to go to the masses, right? Which is what we're trying to do now as CPI. And so Prairie Fire, was the rock band that played at RCP rallies, and they put out some pretty good songs. And I started playing them on these streams, and then that YouTube channel that had Prairie Fire songs on it went away. Now, luckily, I downloaded 2 of the Prairie Fire songs ahead of time. Their song, Get 'Em Off Our Backs, the 200 Years July 4th song, and their song about China. Thank goodness. But there's a lot of other Prairie Fire songs that I really liked that I can't find anymore. And I honestly, I hate to say this because communism, but I think it's true. Communism is a small world. And I think that YouTube channel got word that I was playing those songs, and they don't agree with the politics that I put out on here. And so they took that music down to try and prevent me from playing it on here. I know that sounds a little bit self-important, right? I know that does sound a little bit like, yeah, the whole world revolves around you. But YouTube, actual communist YouTube, I'm not talking about, bread tubers and all that, but in terms of like Marxist, Leninist, hardline, tanky YouTube channels that defend Stalin, that's a very small pond. Like there's me, and I don't even call myself a communist anymore. I'm an innovationist. I don't even want to be associated with these people anymore. But there was there was me, there was Jason and Ruhe. There's some other communities that have sprung up. It's a pretty small community. And I am convinced that they heard that I was playing Prairie Fire songs, and they didn't agree with me because the YouTube channel that was posting them was associated with a group called Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And the reason that they had it is because the Revolutionary Communist Party split, and there was a breakaway called the Revolutionary Worker Headquarters, and now there's a group called the Freedom Road Socialist Organization that is what's left over from it's the Revolutionary Worker Headquarters. It's a split from the RCP. And they're still around. And that YouTube channel that had the Prairie Fire music on it, I believe was a Freedom Road Socialist Organization affiliated YouTube channel. And so because of that, they didn't like that I was using the RCP's music to make the political point, because there is a fundamental disagreement between me and the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. And I will be absolutely real with you all about that fundamental disagreement, which is the Freedom Road Socialist Organization believes that you should be part of the left, right? Even though they claim to support North Korea, even though they claim to support modern China, even though they kind of say they support Russia or not, or it's not clear if they support Russia, all they do is go around campaigning for Democrats. They organize their members to have protests around trendy liberal causes, to get jobs at liberal labor unions or liberal nonprofits, and they're super secretive, and it's a scam, right? And I've known many ex-members of Freedom Road, and it's basically just a scam, right? And that's how all these communist groups are. You join because you want to be a communist, and then they use you to be a tool of the Democrats and a tool of the CIA, basically, of the color revolution, George Soros apparatus. And Freedom Road, it's a little bit worse because they at least claim to be tankies. They claim to support these anti-imperialist states, but what do? You look at their website, they have Fight Back News, which is their website that shows what they do. Until the Palestine rallies started on the campuses, all they were doing was going around trying to get Republicans outlawed, right? And that doesn't make any goddamn sense when Republicans are more anti-war than Democrats are, but that was all they did and they would dox people, and they would hack into people's servers and expose, and it was the lamest left book loser. They were just trying to get Republican organizations banned from college campuses. That is absolutely disgusting. You want to talk about not anti-imperialism, right? Trying to get Republican, there's probably nothing less anti-imperialist in this time than being one of these left book losers who's always trying to find proof, screenshots that somebody's transphobic on a college campus so they can get their Republican group banned. I got the Republican group banned because I hacked into his email, and he one time didn't end his email with his pronouns. He's a transphobe, and I reported him to the school, and I got the group outlawed. I mean, it's like, how can these people look themselves in the goddamn mirror and pretend that what they're doing has anything to do with anti-imperialism? I mean, it's just utterly despicable. And then the Palestine protests started on the college campuses. They became very trendy. And now they're all upset because a lot of their members that have been going to these Palestine encampments, I agree with that, are now getting in trouble on their campus. And it's like, oh, well, did you not think setting a precedent where, if your college can kick you out if they think you're racist? Well, in case you haven't turned on CNN, that's what they say about the Palestine protests. They're anti-Semitic, and that maybe we shouldn't be creating an atmosphere where people get kicked out of school because someone disagrees with their political opinion, right? Maybe we shouldn't be enabling the government to suppress people because that can be used against us. Duh. And this is, I'm too smart. I'll just be honest with you all, right? I'm not claiming I'm an Einstein, but I'm a little bit too smart for the hustle that these communist groups do. These communist groups are all scams, right? They're just liberal activist clubs that are selling you the fantasy of being a communist, right? They find teenagers who think they're Che Guevara or think they're Mao or something, and you join a secret club and you get a code name and you become a George Soros liberal activist. And I'm number one, I'm too smart for it because I've seen this from the inside and I've seen how disgusting it is. And I know how the game is played, number one. And number two, I'm not willing to just walk away, right? Because most people who do that, it's communist groups in America are supposed to be a college phase, right? You're supposed to join one of these groups, Freedom Road, PSL, or whatever. And you join it for 1 or 2 years in college. And then you realize it's never really going to expand. It's never really going to develop a base among the masses. And then you quit and you just go back to living biologically. That's what you're supposed to do. And I refuse to do that. And I have made myself an important anti-imperialist person going to Russia and, reporting internationally for international television and interviewing the president of Iran. I've done real anti-imperialist work. And that's why these people hate me. They should love me. If these people really want peace with Russia, they should love me because no one's done more to bring about peace with Russia. You saw me in the video with Putin. You saw me at the United Nations. They should love me, but they hate me. These people, they say they want peace with Iran. They should love me. How many times have I been to Iran? Did you see me interview the president of Iran? They should love me, but they hate me because they're not sincere. I show them up because they're frauds, right? These people, they're basically the person at work who's a lazy shirk who doesn't do anything but collects a check, and then you come to work and you are working hard and busting your ass, and they're like, asshole, why are you showing me up? I'm making money here doing nothing. That's what they are. That's what PSL is. That's what Freedom Road is. That's what all these people are. They're collecting a check. They're being the communists in America and accomplishing nothing. And then I show up and I'm just a guy with a YouTube channel, right? CPI, we're not a huge group, but we've moved mountains compared to these idiots, and they're furious. They're thieves caught in the act. They're scam artists. We're exposing that if they were actually serious with all the money these groups have, with all the members they have, they could really get some shit done, but they don't because most of them are completely controlled by the FBI at this point, right? The CPUSA has been controlled by the FBI since the 50s, and these groups, they're controlled by the FBI, they're controlled by the intelligence agencies. And that's why they hate me. And they absolutely hate me. They loathe me. I mean, they are desperate to destroy me. They've targeted. I mean, I scare the bejesus out of them because their scam is over. Their time is up, right? They suck. They absolutely suck. And when I went to the World Communist Youth Festival in 2013, international communists said to me, American communists really suck. And it's a big problem because we need anti-imperialists in America. We need people in America that will build the case for opposing imperialism. And you guys got to get your shit together. Well, the leaders of these groups, the scam artists who run the CPUSA and run Workers' World and run PSL and run the RCP, they don't want the scam to be over. They want to keep collecting their check. They want to keep scamming 20-year-olds. They want to keep the revolving door where, you know, a 20-year-old joins, and then by the time they're 24, they've quit and they hate communism because they feel like that was a waste of my time. Well, I'm not doing that. And you'll notice it's interesting. Someone pointed out that CPI, we attract an older crowd, not old, right? We have a few senior citizens, but we don't attract 19 and 20-year-olds. We attract people in their late 20s, early 30s. That's your typical demographic for a CPI member. And the reason for that is that we're kind of an acquired taste. You have to kind of see what's out there. You have to see the weakness of what calls itself communism and leftism in America before you then can understand our approach, right? Because we're doing something a bit more sophisticated with CPI. We're not doing the basic, we're not just trying to, oh, you're a communist? Well, sign up here and join our club and don't ask questions. We're not doing that. We're actually, very serious about what we're doing. We're pulling off, a very sophisticated effort to try and build a network of people that can carry out anti-imperialist operations, can raise consciousness, can build networks, can eventually set up a base, right? And have buildings and have communities where we matter. We're actually doing it, right? We're actually doing it. And these, and it takes a level of experience to understand what we are doing. Right? If I was 20, I would probably love Luigi Mangione. I would be mad about healthcare and I'd be like, yeah, he killed them. Well, I have been around long enough to see how toxic that Luigi Mangione shit really is. Right? That is the worst possible thing right now. If we create a culture of political violence, forget it. There will never be an anti-imperialist movement. Right? If we create an atmosphere where going to a political rally gets you shot, where people are murdering each other for political disagreements, we will fall apart, right? And I'm saying that, and it's not obvious. I understand that. If I was 20 and I had just discovered communism and all I knew was big health corporations are bad, I would probably love Luigi Mangione. It is only with my experience as a 37-year-old dude who's been doing this a long time, who's studied the history of revolutionary movements around the world, who has at this point broken with dialectical materialism and understood why communism, the red flag movement is never coming back. But if we want to build an anti-imperialist movement, there are certain things we can learn, and developed a whole new, way of doing things, innovationism. I mean, this is not entry-level knowledge, right? And so, we are a bit of an acquired taste, right? And that's fine, right? Because again, we're not trying to win a popularity contest, especially not an internet popularity contest. We're trying to actually pull off operations. And if you look at everything we've done, watch our end of the year videos, and we accomplished so much for anti-imperialism because we have experience. You watch the videos I showed earlier of all of the anti-war work that we have done, right? I mean, you saw me, talking to Putin. You saw our UN press conference. You saw rally after rally after rally. You saw us in Minneapolis. We are doing it. You saw us at the inauguration in D.C. You saw us outside Madison Square Garden. We do it. We get shit done for anti-imperialism. And it's not that other groups, don't do anything. Some of them don't do anything, but it's also that what they're doing isn't helpful, right? I mean, right now, for example, right? I think that what Trump is doing with this El Salvador stuff is wrong. I think what Trump is doing with the Palestine students is wrong. Is that our focus as CPI? No. Because how would we be helping if we did that? Everyone's already talking about that. Rachel Maddow's already talking about that, about El Salvador. There's all kinds of liberals talking about that. How would we be helping anything if we just followed the herd and said, that's right, free Mahmoud Khalil, El Salvador, bring the gang members back? How would we help anything? Right? I agree with those things. Mahmoud Khalil shouldn't be deported for his political views, and the El Salvador deportations are not constitutional and they're wrong. But would we really be helping anti-imperialism in any way if we just echoed what the goddamn liberals are saying? Of course not. How would that be helpful? How is that helpful? And that's what communist groups do, right? That's what communist groups do. They just, whatever is trendy with the liberals, they try to say it louder, and they think somehow that's going to change things. No, they don't really think somehow that's going to change things. It's a scam. They know it's not going to change things, right? They know it's not going to change things. That's what they know. They know it's not going to change things, and they know that it's just, they're just going. I look at these communist groups. These are groups that support Iran. Well, if you support Iran, why are you not out there saying we support peace talks? Why are you not out there in Chicago saying peace with Iran? But they're not. They're out there saying Trump is bad, Trump is racist. How is that helping Iran? Right? If you want to end U.S. aid to Ukraine, which not a lot of them do, but a few of them do, why are you not out there? Why are you not out there loudly supporting the peace talks like we are? Oh, because, it's like they don't contribute anything to the conversation, right? This is called tailism. Lenin, of all people, wrote a book about it. It was called What Is to Be Done? And he called tailism, where you just go along with whatever's out there, right? There's something that people already believe, and you just say, I believe that too. And I'm a communist and I believe that too. Well, whoop-de-doo. Whoop-de-doo. What are you contributing by doing that? Right? In a lot of cases, what the left is saying is absolutely wrong. In this case, Mahmoud Khalil, they're right. El Salvador, they're right. But what contribution would we be making if we just went to liberal rallies and said, we agree with you? And how would that introduce anyone to anti-imperialism? How would that change the conversation? Especially when the people that are at those rallies are more pro-imperialist. And the second you said anything sympathetic to Putin, they would punch you in the face. It's like, how is that productive? You have to think with your limited resources and your energy, isn't it better to make the biggest impact that you can make, right? And that's why, we're distributing this book all about the Houthis. And we have this book explaining who the Houthis are and where the organization came from. We're distributing 1,000 copies of this across the country, right? That's a contribution. We're making a contribution. Millions, thousands of people are going to learn from this book who the Houthis are, an anti-colonial movement, how they've got a picket line in the Red Sea. I compare it to a labor union picket line, right? We're doing real political education, and we're making a contribution with our limited resources and our small group of members. We're out there teaching people and raising consciousness, and other people are engaging in tailism. Anyway, I could ramble about how much communists have disappointed me all night, but you all don't want to hear that. And we don't care anymore. We're not communists. We're innovationists, and we're innovating. And that's why what we're doing is so important. I will put this on because, there's some people, this is my favorite, right? Whenever my name gets brought up, they all know my name. They all know who I am. Right? If you ask these people, he's not important, they always say. It's funny. Well, you can see me talking to Putin there. You see me talking to Riazi. You see me at international I'm not important, though, right? I'm totally not important, right? But then it's funny because I'm so unimportant. That then when I go to have a small workshop in Minneapolis, what happens, right? I want to put that video on for you again because the video of what happened when the protest against our workshop in Minneapolis is so important because it shows you how scared they are of CPI. They didn't have to do this, right? You'll see the video for yourself. It shows you we are really goddamn important. We went to a Midwestern city, and like 15 people got up early on a Saturday morning to defame me personally and defame CPI, because we're so important, right? And so that's always first they say I'm bad, and they say, oh, and he's not important. I think I am, right? Does this happen when anyone else goes to a city, right? This is, I was talking with people from the Unification Church. They said this is like what happened when Reverend Moon used to go around. Right? He would go around and, he would go to give a speech in San Francisco and there'd be a bunch of angry, Steve Hassan people outside. It's a cult. Don't go in there. That's what happens to me. Right? I am, I got a Reverend Moon style welcome to Minneapolis. Let's review what happened, right? This is literally, we had a tiny workshop, a great workshop. Shout out to all the people there, and Penny and Melody and Oh, I mean, it's a great group of folks out of there. Carter and oh, it's a great group of people, and you know, all ages, and oh, it was really, really great. But it's like we had a small little workshop, and this was how desperate people were to prevent it from happening, and they failed.
We went out to Minneapolis to do just kind of a routine small workshop that we do in a number of cities. We've done them before, where we get together, have some classes, get to know different members, different friends. Anyhow, we get out there and we see all these crazy signs posted up all over the neighborhood. Let's not alert the membership as of yet, right? Because they want a reaction. If they see they're getting a reaction, that'll embolden them, right? We'll just be extra careful with security at the door. But honestly, I don't think we should not do the event. No, I think we should do it. I guess we'll just proceed with our meeting as usual. Okay, so the first thing is that the break time is the most important, right? The break time when we're actually talking to people is the most important time, right? Actually, when I'm speaking and all that, it's not that important. What's important is when we're talking with the people. On Saturday morning, our main concern was the lack of heat. The Airbnb had not turned the heat on, and it was record low temperatures. It was a very, very cold night, so we're inside the house, and we're figuring we can't really start the workshop until the heat comes on. So then we see them outside.
Burger King! Burger King! Burger King! Burger King! Burger King!
It is 8:30 in the morning.
And it's like 20 below zero.
We're gonna wake up the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
Everyone's in the neighborhood's gonna hate them.
The house across the street looks abandoned or dilapidated. I don't think they're worried about fascism. They're worried about putting food on the table.
We're worried about getting the heat turned on.
Yes,
It's a little cold here. The heat hasn't been turned on in our Airbnb.
And these guys start preemptively gloating that nobody is showing up.
No, we expected to be like turning the attendees away. It's amazing. It seems like no one is coming. Wow.
Not knowing that we literally don't have heat, and we're not gonna start the thing without heat. It was actually like a solid hour after they left before we got the heat, and then we had people start coming. Well, actually, I take that back. There was one gentleman they did get to try to intimidate out of attending, a disabled gentleman, which, you know, that's cool.
They shouted at him, "Don't go in there, they'll rape you."
He attended, though. He was not scared of them.
Hello, Gabby.
I've seen you. I've seen you on the
Can we see
videos.
what they gave you?
Hello.
Can we see what they gave you?
Warning, this is a cult. Press TV. Oh, wow. It's Dugan.
Press TV.
Oh, man. Linda LaRouche. And your name's on here, too.
Really?
Yeah.
What? Famous.
Right? You're a failed political candidate and dedicated follower of Caleb Maupin's. You know, we're inside and like laughing about it. The whole thing just looked completely insane. At 8:30 in the morning, in record cold temperatures, you have 15 kids out there wearing COVID masks with signs about spanking and fascism and cults. I mean, the whole thing just had to look completely insane.
What are they saying?
Maupin runs the CPI. He's a weird little guy. One of the chants that they had, which I absolutely loved, was Caleb owns CPI. He's a weird little guy.
Caleb runs the CPI. He's a weird little guy.
They're calling you weird, dancing around with signs that no one understands.
Now, I thought that was very funny.
And by the way, don't you find some of their stuff to just be plain weird?
At one point, Peter Coffin walked out among the protesters. I immediately thought of the scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy wakes up and she's walking among the munchkins.
Come out, wherever you are.
Because they were all like really short in comparison to him. And it made me think that the guy on the bullhorn or one of the people that had thought of that chant, they must have been called a weird little guy at some point in their life.
You're so out of touch. You think CPUSA would be a viable force to put together a picket like this? It's amazing.
They were on the bullhorn talking about communist inside baseball.
Colt, I mean, you started in the RCP, so it's used to Colt.
Gospels were a joke even to Trots.
No, we're trying to show you we care enough to tell you guys what's going on here. We want you guys to get out of the cult. We're trying to show you we care enough. No, we're trying to show you we care enough to tell you guys what's going on here. We want you guys to get out of the cult.
We are gonna have some fun with with them, but we don't want to be too mean to them, because there's a lot of people in this organization around the country, and I'm not going to violate anyone's private business, but more than a handful of people that have joined CPI that have told me why they joined CPI. And they said, Caleb, you know, I was in these communist circles, I was in my 20s, and I was using drugs. I rock bottomed. You know, I screwed up, I did something wrong, and, you know, I had to go into recovery. And I realized that if I was going to get over my addiction, I couldn't keep thinking in the pessimistic, dark, hopeless way that seems to accompany communist politics in America. I had to be optimistic. And I suddenly started hearing you, and you were the only communist I could stand to listen to anymore. You were the only one that was putting out a hopeful, optimistic message that wasn't tearing people down, that wasn't preaching resentment. I believe there were people out there that are in that same category. Do you know what I honestly believe deep in my soul? I believe that there were people out there today that will eventually join CPI. Let me just put it this way. You can never say that the Center for Political Innovation, or myself, or Peter, you can never say that we're irrelevant. The fact that we had a small meetup was so important to some people that they woke up on Saturday morning, went out in freezing cold temperatures, and made a huge ruckus to tell everyone just how upset they were about the fact that we exist and we continue to do our work. You know, we were ready to defend ourselves, but they weren't a threat to us at all. They were kind of embarrassing, and they were kind of clowns. And I'm embarrassed for whatever organization let this happen, was involved in making it happen. And I'm also embarrassed for the people that did this protest, because you were out there making fools out of yourselves while we were inside talking about the serious issues and how to change the future of our country, how to fight against imperialism, globalism, how to fight for working families. So yeah, certainly an interesting trip to Minneapolis. I'm glad we were there, and yeah, we're going to do a lot more workshops, let me put it that way.
Sorry. Yeah, we are very important. We are very, very important. So, I mean, there's no question that we are out there really playing an important role. And the fact that people are paying attention to us, right? People obviously are very concerned that we exist and trying to shut us down. You know, there were people in the chat tonight saying kind of similar shit. You know, there are people who just, they really, you know, they see how what we are doing is so important, and it drives them up the wall because they're on the other side, right? And again, you know, if we weren't playing an important role, people wouldn't go out of their way to protest us as they did. And so, you know, hey, I am really excited about our organization. I'm really, really happy. Some great stuff. The meetings that we've been having lately, our membership is on fire. There was a meeting today in Chicago. Penny had a meeting yesterday in Minneapolis. She was telling me about great meeting with people, and we're doing great stuff, right? This is coming together. We're building an organization. We have a network of people who can work together and get shit done. And that's why CPI exists. It's to work together and to get shit done. I'm headed out to LA in a couple weeks. This is for real. We're doing it, folks. We are doing it. This is not entertainment. We are building a movement. We are building the movement that needs to be created to oppose imperialism. And I did a great slideshow last night. I'm going to stream the slideshow will be premiered tomorrow as a standalone video. You know, and we have a mission. We're on a mission, and we know what we're doing, and we have a clear understanding of where we're going and what we're getting done. We got shit to do, right? And we're going to keep doing what we do, and we're not going to stop, right? Because, you know, and when that peace deal comes through, you know, when the peace deal with Russia comes through, you can thank CPI, because we've been out there beating the drum and facing a lot of persecution, a lot of smears, and a lot of harassment. And we've been out there beating the drum and saying Russia is not our enemy, and hoping that the USA can be reborn as part of the new economy emerging in the world today. We have a message that's pretty much in line with what the overwhelming majority of the American people want, right? We are the ultimate patriots. We want jobs, schools, education. We want an economy that serves public good, not the profits of a wealthy few. We want to invest in people and not Wall Street derivative ripoff schemes. we represent what the majority of people want. We've left behind the vulgar atheism and the you know, the rebellion aesthetics of communism. We're not trying to behead anybody. We're not trying to have a bloody revolution. We just want an America that trades with countries on the basis of win-win cooperation. We just want a government that allows working families to thrive and prosper and invests in our neighborhoods and communities, not war and destruction around the world. We want a government of action that fights for working families. And we are going to build the movement that is urgently needed to create that. And we've got a unique understanding. And I've traveled the world, and we've got friends around the world, and we've got unique insights. And we're in a really, really unique position to do a lot of good. You know, Jesus Christ said in the Sermon on the Mount, he said to his followers, you know, what did he say? He said, a light, what did he say? He said, I'll get it right. I'll just pull it up. What did Jesus say in the Sermon on the Mount? He said, right? Okay, Matthew 5. Here, I'll pull it up. I'll just get it right, right? Why not just get it right, right? He said, "Ye are the light of the world, and a city that is on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do men light a candle or put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." That is something I really try to think about. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Like, it is necessary to bring goodness. You know, I come back to this a lot. When I was a kid, you know, my parents would say to me, be positive, have a better attitude. And I would hate that. I'd say, I can be negative if I want. I don't feel good. I want to be negative. But actually, there's something to that. If you have a good look on your face and a smile on your face, you actually make it easier for the people that you're around to be happier. And that you feed off, our human beings are collective, and we feed off each other's energy. And if the people you're around are very negative, you're going to be very negative. But if the people you're around are very positive, it's much easier for you to be positive, even if things in your life aren't perfect, you know, and that we really have a duty to give good energy into the world, to be positive, to think positive, to promote good relationships, to not put out so much negativity. I think about when I was doing the whole communist thing, I was so negative in my 20s. I was just so negative. I was so angry. I was just so, you know, and that's not a message that's going to help anybody. People don't need to hear about how bad the world is. People need to hear about how amazing the world is going to be when we have a rationally organized economy and when imperialism is defeated. People need to hear about the good time coming. They don't need to just hear about the badness of the way things are. And people know things are bad. And giving that negativity to people doesn't help. We need to give people hope and optimism, right? That's what we need to be giving people. We need to be projecting positive energy out into the world. You know, oh, well, we have two more Rumble rants from John McCarthy. I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Biden honored Pope Francis by wearing the right color suit. Trump is honoring Pope Francis by trying to implement his vision for Ukraine peace. Well, there you go. Yeah, yeah. Pope Francis, to his credit, he was not an anti-Russian warmonger. And when Dari Dugina, who I met on a number of occasions, was brutally murdered, he condemned that murder, and he prayed for Dari Dugina, which was a very, very Christian and kind thing to do. And that's very, very admirable on his part. And then he says, one thing I will say in defense of Frizzo is that they do support Uhuru. And they do, right? And, you know, they do. And that's because they got raided by the FBI back in 2010. In 2010, they were raided by the FBI because they were doing Palestine work. They were never charged or indicted, but they were victims of an FBI attack. And so they, as a matter of principle, they have to support Uhuru, and that is to their credit that they do support Uhuru. You know, so that is to their credit. So there you go. But yeah, the main thing is, and we spend a little too much time, I need to be more positive on these streams. I'm trying to make an effort to not talk shit against American communists anyway, because what's the point? I do that a little too much, but it's, something I think a lot about, unfortunately. I need to not think about it as much, but being positive and having an optimistic view and celebrating, because look at all those videos. I mean, we have such an amazing group, CPI. I mean, wow. I mean, we are doing such amazing stuff. But being positive is something that we all need to work on. And when you have positive thoughts, the world around you changes. A thought is a really existing thing. And when you think with your mind, you create something. So make something positive with your mind. So I'm just going to end. This is actually a poem I first heard it from an old communist. I believe it's Masonic in origin. But it's a great poem. And I heard this poem. And when I had my religious conversion experience, I started thinking about this a lot. I went up and looked up the words. I remembered it from when it had been recited to me by an old communist. And I started thinking about it. And the whole city builders and vandals and city building tendency and all that we've done really comes back from thinking about this poem a lot when I was in Iran. And it goes like this. This is the poem that I really credit a lot of my improved thinking over the years with. On a busy street in a busy town, I saw them tearing a building down. With a ho heave ho and a lusty yell, the men swung a beam and a side wall fell. So I said to the foreman, "Are these men skilled, like those you might hire if you wanted to build?" And the foreman just smiled and said, "No, indeed. Unskilled labor is all that I need. For I can easily wreck in a week or two that which took builders years to do." So I thought to myself as I walked away, which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who builds with care, measuring life with a compass and square? Am I living my life by a well-made plan and striving to do the best that I can? Or am I the type that scours the town, content with the labor of tearing things down? And that's how I've tried to live my life. I try to be a city builder. And I try to be someone who's putting light and optimism out there in the world. And I apply that to my understanding of anti-imperialism and my understanding that there is no limit to human growth and creativity, and that human beings, with our brilliance and our ability to reinvent our relationship with nature, have done amazing things. And we need a system, an economic system that taps into that ability. Yeah, that's who I've tried to be. Am I a person who's made mistakes? Of course, I make mistakes just like anybody else. We all make mistakes, right? We're all human, but we learn. If you never make mistakes, you never learn. And we have continued to learn, and we've learned, and we continue to get better at what we're doing. We are the anti-imperialist movement of America. I love you all. I love you all. And I should say good night. It's going to be midnight in a half hour here. But I'll be back probably tomorrow, if not the next day. Everyone's doing great work, but keep Chicago on your mind. We need you in Chicago. We need you to come to Chicago. Book your ticket. Take some time off work. July is a long way away. Chicago is the most important thing we've done in a long time. Be there. We need you there. Be in Chicago. Be in Chicago. We need you there. It's going to be very, very important. So on that note, folks, we're going to put on the closing music. And I really appreciate all of you and what we do here, the magic that we do on these streams, night after night after night. We do something special here. This community is really, really valuable.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.